Hey, Nick from Harvest Profit and the Playbook Project. Hope everybody is having a great day. Welcome to day 12 of our Starting a Software Company in 100 Days initiative. So, I wanted to share with you today some thoughts on selecting a development firm and sharing with you the direction that I am going with in building out Playbook. So, if you don't know, I went through a couple iterations of building out Harvest Profit, which is our other software company, which is a financial analysis tool for farmers, primarily in the US and Canada. And the first couple iterations of that, I found out about some of these freelance sites and I just dove in headfirst. I sketched some ideas, I built some initial wireframes. I didn't even know I was building wireframes, but I built them in Excel and it worked, but the process just fell apart. Why did I fail? Really a lack of project management, a lack of understanding of tech, and really just a lack of the knowledge of the software development process. And so, what really turned the course for getting the first version of Harvest Profit done were two things. Um, One, I learned a little bit about programming and project management. So became familiar with things such as Kanban or Kanban, basically scoping out certain sets of tasks and only working on a few things and ensuring that those things are done satisfactory before you move on. I taught myself some Ruby on Rails, and front end HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I still can't really program, but I understand for the most part what's going on when I look at code and understand. I understood what tech stack I wanted to go with. The first version of Harvest Profit was built using, I think, ASP or even more some older piece of technology that just really isn't supported right now. And I knew nothing about that at the time. I just, somebody put a proposal for me on what then was Elance, and I just said, oh, why not? And let's hit the ground running. Well, then when I have a $10,000 budget and I burned through that and had nothing to show for it, I not only did that once, I did that twice. And finally, before I did that the third time, I said, well, three strikes and we're out here. I'm a relatively smart person, like I'm sure you are. I need to learn about building software, what technologies, what processes, and really what are best practices around both of those things. And so the thing that turned the corner for Harvest Profit was learning that, and then working with a local development firm. They were definitely at a premium price, not the top of the market by any stretch of the imagination, but over $100 an hour, and we spent I think 400 or 500 hours working on the first version of Harvest Profit. It was actually 400 hours. I know, right around 400 plus or minus 10 before we got the first paying customer. That doesn't include my time, which was hundreds of hours. But really, the local firm, and that was a firm called Codilation. They had a good core group of people who were experts on Ruby on Rails, and then had a project management layer on top of that. And so that was a turning point for my project, was having somebody local that I could meet with. We could jot down ideas together and we could brainstorm. Really changed the trajectory of that. And now we're growing towards I think we're at like $600,000 of revenue now with just a hand, four employees, two part-time. And so far it's turned into a nice business that's growing, happy customers. And so we're continuing to iterate on that Harvest Profit product as we add another product to the portfolio, which is Playbook. And so now when I'm looking to build Playbook, I've found a firm that is really experts in both Ruby on Rails and React, which is our primary tech stack. And they have a relatively sizable team. They have philosophies in place for testing. They have philosophies in place for project management. And basically, they just have processes in place for how to build software. And so, one thing we're gonna look at here is, do you asking some questions of yourself? Do you have experience with software development and project management? If you do, I think you could go, both out of your area. There, I'll change this quick. Yes. If you do not have experience with the software development process and building software, I would be inclined to stay local and a firm. For me, local is a bit more of maybe more of a controversial topic, but for me, I found a lot of value in meeting with the developer and meeting with the team, and we got on the same page. And really, we were able to click, and we could almost understand the project requirements and the scope of the project. Really, we got in sync. That's how probably the best way I can say it is we got in sync. And also a firm, when you're the reason why you pay a higher price for a software development firm is because you're getting the project management. Likely you're going to have a project manager working on your team. And so not only do you have the development resource, but included within that is project management. And that's really where a lot of the added expense comes in, is you have the developer, but you have the supporting infrastructure around that developer. And so if you have experience with software development in the past, or managing a project, I think you can do out of area. You could hire a solo developer, although there just comes a lot of risks come with that. So then the other thing to look at is, tech stack. Do they perform work in the technology stack of your choice? And going back to a prior video, I looked at Ruby on Rails, PHP, Python, specifically for PHP, the Laravel framework, for Python, the Django framework, and then also you could do full stack JavaScript using Node.js, and then one of the many JavaScript front end frameworks. So making sure the tech stack is modern and aligns with what you are looking to do, I think, is very, very important. The other thing I would ask questions about is testing. What is their philosophy around testing? This is something that I really, really underestimated, the importance of testing. As you add features to code, it just becomes literally impossible to manually test code. And so building unit tests, building integration tests, basically making sure your code has testing functionality, I think, is important. So as you bring on new developers who are adding features, and you continue to make features even with the same core team, it just becomes impossible to test all the edge cases. And even with this testing, it's still hard. But I really think testing is an important part of the process, and I would select developers and or teams, firms that really respect the testing methodology. The other thing is just, what is their process? Do they have a process? Ideally, you're just not going to shoot from the hip here. You're going to travel down, a defined process for software development. A needs analysis phase, a design phase, a development phase, a QA phase. And so making sure there's a defined process in place, I think, is very important and a key to success if you're evaluating, maybe working with a solo developer versus a firm. Nothing wrong with working with a solo developer, but just understand that they should have a defined process in place to help you along the way in building out your project. Design, do they have designers in-house? One thing I've learned is very rarely do you have a developer who is also a great designer. It just isn't, one part of our brain thinks logical, and one part of our brain thinks artistic. And there are developers who can be, good designers, but finding a great designer and a great developer is a little bit of a unicorn. I've actually met a couple of them, but I wouldn't expect that to be the norm. So understanding the design capabilities of whoever you select. For the Playbook project and the Playbook MVP, we've used a firm called ManyPixels to do the backbone of the design. And then I found a design agency from Eastern Europe who is, we're doing maybe 20, 30 iterative changes on top of the building blocks that we set in place with that ManyPixels. And then the other thing I just wanted to touch on was, before we get to the most important, and maybe not the most important, but a key consideration for everybody, the thing I want to talk about is just the risk of disappearing. This is a big risk in working with a solo developer, is they might get a full-time job, they might find a more lucrative client, and there's just an awful lot of risk that you could end up. I've heard numerous stories of a developer just kind of ghosting a contractor, freelancer, where they just, for whatever reason, are done working on your project, and you never hear from them again. And so on top of that, you're going to want to use a code repository tool like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. So they're making continuous pushes of code into the code repository that you have control over, so you can turn off their access if they do disappear on you. So make sure you have ownership of that code. And then in a future video, we're going to talk about contracts, but just make sure that you have the code in your control. So if they do move on without fully communicating that to you, you don't get burned. And the other thing, which is a little bit subjective, but it's cost. I tend to buy into the camp of you get what you pay for, but you have to be realistic to your budget. If you have a $20,000 budget and you're going to hire a firm, a high-end local firm or an onshore firm that costs $180 an hour, are you really going to build a sound software project in 110, 120 hours? I don't think so. And so, what I've seen is, you can find quality talent from, $25 an hour to $250 an hour locally. If you're using an onshore firm, you're going to be almost certain to be above $100 an hour. The firm that we are using is, I would call it a premium firm. It's Big Binary. That's the name of the firm. A premium outsourcing agency. They have devs. They have a project management staff in the US, and they use contractors from all over the country. And that is, in that $50 to $100 range, specifically for this project. And I don't know how this lines up with their published rates, but in the era of, with the goal of being as transparent as possible, we're paying $60 an hour for development in building out the MVP of Playbook. And so those are just some considerations that I've had, some things that I've learned. Tech stack, understanding programming, project management, testing, those are all things that I really had no idea about when I jumped in and pretty much lit $20,000 on fire in building the first version of our software company, our product called Harvest Profit. And so taking those lessons moving forward, knowing that this Playbook project, we don't want it to be a multiple $100,000 bet. So we're going with a firm that has the project management and the process of Big Binary. It's a firm, it's an agency. We don't have the risk of them disappearing, but also they're using some talent from other parts of the world. And so they keep the cost per hour quite efficient. So I just want to share with you my thoughts and the experiences that I've had selecting the development firms so you can make the best choice if you decide to do this on yourself. And so thank you for joining me today on day 12 of the Playbook project. Tomorrow I'm going to jump in and give you some more details about where we're at and hop into Basecamp and show you the progress we have made to date. So please subscribe and accept notifications so you can be notified of future videos, and look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.